Welcome to another episode of Mexican in the Kitchen. I have a pot on the stove, it has some water. I added also a handful of sea salt. It's on a 4 out of 6 on the stove, and once the water starts boiling, I'm going to add 8 medium-sized potatoes. These potatoes have been washed and you can peel them if you want. A lot of people do for this recipe. I don't really mind and I like a bit of the texture, but this is completely up to you. We will let them boil for about 20 minutes and we'll check if they're ready. While the potatoes are boiling, we have time to make a really quick hot sauce. I have some water boiling and I'm going to add 3 tomatoes. I will also add half a small onion. I'm going to use also some canned chipotle, but if you want to use jalapeno or something else, then you should boil it here as well. After a few minutes, you will notice that the skin is coming off from the tomato, and at that point our tomatoes are ready. For now we can set this aside. I have this skillet on a 3 out of 6 on the stove, so medium fire. I'm going to add 100 grams of salted peanuts. These kind of peanuts are already toasted, but I want to give a bit of an extra toast. And for that we have to be very careful, because if we overdo it, they might become quite bitter and we don't really want that in our sauce. You have to keep moving them around, and as you can see here, some of them start to have these a bit darker spots. So at this point I'm just going to take them out and set them aside. Now I'm going to add all my ingredients to the blender. As always, we start with the tomato because it's the ingredient that has the most water, and that will help us blend everything together. The next thing to add is going to be the onion. I'm adding 2 garlic cloves. I will add about a teaspoon of salt. Then I'm adding the chipotle. In Finland you will probably find pirka or la costeña. If you want it more spicy, use the chipotles. If you want it less spicy, just use the sauce. The amount you use here is up to you. I usually use maybe a chipotle or 2 or 3 spoons of the sauce. Finally, we will add the 100 grams of peanuts we toasted. After that, we can blend, and we will blend until it becomes a really smooth sauce. This peanut sauce is really nice. You can make variations of the same with different kind of dried chilies, fresh chilies, maybe use different kind of peanuts or nuts. In this case, it goes really well with our tostadas. My potatoes have been boiling now for 20 minutes. I'm going to use a fork to test them, and as you can see, they're quite soft. So at this point, our potatoes are ready. Since I want my potatoes to be ready quick, I'm going to remove all the water and I'm going to add a bit of cold water to them. After that, I will just set them aside and let them cool down. I'm going to use some chorizo, and usually I would use the Mexican version, but in this case, here in Finland, I cannot find it, so I'm going to use the Spanish one. I'm going to use 100 grams, and we want this for the flavor, so I'm going to cut it and just chop it in small pieces. Mexican chorizo is more like a soft paste, so it's easier to throw into the pan and you will get this ground meat kind of texture. But this will work because it still keeps a lot of flavor. I want to cut everything into small cubes, and I'm going to set this aside. Then I'm going to chop 1 large onion. I want to cut it into small cubes. Just like with the chorizo, once I'm done, I'm just going to set it aside. Finally, we need to cut the potatoes into cubes, and for this I'm going to try to make them roughly the same size. We want them to cook evenly, and we are just going to throw them in the pan to get some of the flavors, so this is going to be quite quick. Just try to make them the same size, and that should be enough. I have a pan now on a 3 out of 6, so medium fire. I have some canola oil on it, and I'm going to throw my chorizo. I want to cook this slowly, because that way you will notice all the colors and flavors of the chorizo will go into the oil, and that will be quite nice, because later when we add the potatoes, that will cover the potatoes really nice, and it will give them a really nice color. After a few minutes, you will notice that the oil has gotten a quite nice red color, and at this point I'm going to add the onion, and I'm just going to mix everything, make sure everything cooks evenly, and I'll wait for the onion to become this kind of see-through, and at that point I will add also the potatoes. Once we have added the potatoes, we just have to mix everything. We want our potatoes to absorb all those flavors. Of course, the oil will help make some of them a bit more crispy, and at this point we can season with some salt and some black pepper. Now we can keep mixing them, cooking them for about 10 to 15 minutes. Just make sure nothing gets stuck to the bottom, and after that our potatoes with chorizo are ready. Our potatoes with chorizo are ready, but we're making tostadas, and for that we need some refried beans. For that I bought these San Marcos canned beans. I'm throwing them into a pan that's on a 3 out of 6 on medium fire. I'm using the canned ones, but if you want to make them from scratch, I also have a recipe, so I'll leave the link in the description. I know the texture is not the best, but I'm going to put them in the pan. I'm going to add some milk, and we will change that. I'm using milk for the texture, and of course you can use water, you can use cream, you could maybe even use some almond milk or something similar. You can use whatever you prefer. If you keep mixing, after a while, you will get this creamy, thick texture, and that's exactly what we're looking for. Now our beans are warm and have the proper texture, so we can start making our tostadas. Tostadas are crispy tortillas. It's basically a tortilla chip that hasn't been cut, and usually you would buy them ready. They make them by deep frying tortillas, but in this case I cannot find it in Finland, and I'm going to show you what I do. I have some baking paper on an oven tray, and I'm going to set my tortillas there. For this, I will always use corn tortillas. My oven is preheated at 220 Celsius or 428 Fahrenheit. My tortillas were in for 2.5 minutes, and at this point I'm just going to take them out, flip them over, and put them back in. Of course, this depends on the kind of tortilla you're using. I've noticed some of them take 2 minutes, some of them take closer to 3, so just check on them, make sure you don't burn them. After flipping them, I'm going to give them 2.5 more minutes, and after that they should be crispy. Now that we have all the ingredients ready, we can start preparing our tostada. For that, I have some refried beans on my tostada. After that, I'm going to add a layer of my papas con chorizo. Then I will add a couple slices of avocado. I would usually use quesillo or queso fresco, but I cannot get that here, so I'm using feta in this case. You can use whatever you prefer. I'm going to add a few drops of sour cream or creme fraiche, a few drops of our peanut sauce, and I will just add a bit of shredded lettuce on top, just to have some extra freshness. You've probably seen this before in my channel. I've done some vegan or vegetarian kind of version. This version with potatoes and chorizo is really nice. It's something that's quite cheap to make. It's quite filling. You can also make tacos out of this. You can just have it as a side dish. You can have it on a sandwich. It's one of those dishes that you can use in many ways. The chorizo gives a lot of flavor. The consistency is quite nice. Potatoes are quite filling, so it's a great dish. And here you can put a bit of everything you like on top. You have the crunchiness of the tostada, freshness of the lettuce, some cheese, the hot sauce is quite nice, the beans always go nice with those ingredients, avocado, you cannot go wrong. A lot of people would put this kind of like string cheese, it's called quesillo or Oaxaca cheese in Mexico. This is one of those dishes that most people will love when they try, because it's just so simple, but it still has a lot of flavor. And it goes, as I said, with a lot of things. So I hope you liked the video, activate the bell, share it with your friends, press like, subscribe, all those kind of things, and see you in the next one.